name is Mary Goodwin, and I am the granddaughter of Thaxton Lewis Epperson, or T.L. Epperson, as he was called. And my grandfather was the last receiver and general manager of the Wobbly. He was born in Polk County, and after he and my grandmother married in 1911, they moved to New Willard, where he worked at the sawmill there. He then came to Trinity in the late, probably around 1919, and he went to work for Paul Sanderson, who owned the Texas Longleaf Lumber Company. He worked there for many years for Mr. Sanderson as the business manager for the sawmill. In the late 1930s, Mr. Sanderson was appointed receiver for the Wobbly because it was in bankruptcy. Mr. Sanderson died in 1944, and Judge Max Rogers out of Huntsville asked my grandfather to take over the receivership. My grandfather did it with the stipulation that he would not only have the receivership, but he would be the general manager to try to bring the railroad back to being a producing entity. And when he took it over, of course, there was an 8-mile track, down from 115 miles originally, but the 8-mile track went to the oil fields of Kittrell. And my grandfather spent many hours, many days working and talking with the people of Trinity, the business of Trinity, to try to build up the business so that the railroad could still function. And he was successful. There is an article in the Houston Chronicle of December 1948 where he was interviewed, and he was very proud to say that when he took over the Wobbly in 1945, they averaged about 5 breakdowns per month because the track was so hastily and poorly laid. But since he had taken it over, and this was in 1948, they had only had 1 in the previous 5 months. So he was really excited about that. The Wobbly became a big part of the fabric of the lives of the people in Trinity, as it did my grandfather. He did not consider it just a job. It was to him, it was a passion. It was a love. Everybody in our family knew their status in my grandfather's eyes. Third place was the grandchildren. Second place was his beautiful wife, Pearl. And first place was the Wobbly turnover and stop. I can remember when I was smaller, my grandmother was a fastidious housekeeper. Nothing was ever out of place. It was just a very clean house. But after 1959, and the railroad, the little Wobbly had run its last run to the Kittrell oil fields, and it closed down. My grandfather spent the next probably 5 or 6 years, 7 years, liquidating all of the assets. And I can remember in her kitchen where it was always spotless. I can remember his piles of ledgers, and he was so particular about things. But those were on the dining table, they were in the kitchen, they were on the floor, and I never heard my grandmother say one word about it. I mean, that's just, that's what Thax was doing. I think the thing that I remember so much about my grandfather was the way he dressed. He always, and in any picture you see of him on the Wobbly or at the Roundhouse or wherever he is, he has on dress pants, a long sleeve white shirt, and a tie. Now, if he was going in town to the post office, he also put on his suit coat and his gray fedora hat. Or if he was going to Hudson's Cafe, where he spent a lot of time drinking coffee. He was not only just active with the Wobbly Bobbly, he was also active in the community life of Trinity. He served as the mayor of Trinity for several terms. He was when he passed away in 1972, he was a 50-year member of the Masons. He was also a member of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. I still have his parade uniform. I have the sword and the tricorn hat with the feathers on top and the jacket. And that was very important to him. So he was very active in those ways. But as I said before, he wanted to make sure that every bill was paid. Every person who had worked for the railroad, oftentimes foregoing their salary in order to keep the little railroad operational. He wanted to make sure that every one of those people were paid every dime that they were owed. I know that he liquidated pieces of land right away. Of course, I don't know. I didn't understand back then exactly all he was doing. I have learned that there was a trust set up from the proceeds, which they now use for scholarships, and I know that would thrill him to death to know that that the Wobbly Bobbly was living on. When I go to the Galveston Train Museum and I see that train sitting out there, it's an emotional thing for me, because I was very, very close to my grandparents, and that was just something that was very, very close to his heart. I do have artifacts that I have given to the train museum, and I know that they've made several wonderful exhibits out of those. And I just can't think of anything that he would have been more pleased about than the fact that the Wobbly Bobbly was saved, and that there is a historical marker now where the old Wobbly Bobbly offices were. He always dreamed that Trinity would get a paper mill like Lufkin did, and that would revive the Wobbly Bobbly. And it was very, very difficult for him when that old train made its last run.